Got it. Okay. So welcome back. So this is the second section of the PM training that we are extending today. As mentioned to you in the previous half, that projects are categorized as formal gated projects and informal gated projects, right? Based on different criteria and parameters, based on funds, criticality, importance, risky and regulated projects. So we categorize them into formal gated project and informal gated project. A formal gated project by definition need to follow the SGP to the core. That means it has to follow all the artifacts and all the reviews and approvals. So one of the main artifact that the project need to develop, it could be project manager, or it could be project manager controller, it could be the technical team as one team. They have to come up with the cost estimates, right? How much is this project going to cost? So the line of business or the project sponsor, it could be a line of business or it could be IT project. They should know how much is the cost of the project. Either it is capital or own-dam project, and is it a multi-year project? How much is needed for this year, next year, etc., right? And also they would like to see that these estimations are done to the best of the ability of the project team. So we came up as a EPMO team, a template for you guys to estimate the cost using what is called a cost estimator, okay? So there are two types of estimator tools that we are providing you. One is for formal gated projects, and the other one is a lighter version for informal gated projects, right? So let us talk about the informal gated projects first. This is a lighter version of the cost estimator tool, which we have been using previously, okay? And that in PSEG IT, we have been using this tool. We have not modified that. And that tool is available on the source as informal gated cost estimator. So you can use that link, download it and use it like you have been using for your previous projects before this SGP was rolled out. So leaving that at that point, let us focus on the formal gated project, because we wanted to give a lot more stable and sustainable cost estimation tool to the project teams. And this covers a lot more aspects about cost estimation, like, for example, how many hours and how much, what is the risk factor involved, and how much of the issue factor is involved, and how much of the O&M cost, and what are the integration team's review costs, security team review costs, line of business cost, and then do the weighted average for all these things, right? There is a heavy risk of a particular thing, and you want to give a lot more weightage to that particular risk. That automatically calculates your cost, looking at that importance of that risk and then how that need to be mitigated, right? So your cost may go up based on the importance of the risk, etc. So in order to see this cost estimated tool customized to the formal gated project, we have brought in all these parameters into an Excel format, and that's what we are going to present to you as a cost estimated tool for the formal gated project. Like I mentioned before, this is going to be a joint effort between me and Anthony. So Anthony will run through the first few slides, and then we will shift to the actual cost estimator tool, which I will navigate you, showing each of the tabs and how the data that can flow from one tab to the other tab. And finally, what is the cost estimate at a project level you will get, both for effort and the cost, okay? So I'll stop at this point. So Anthony, you can take on and then go through the first slides.
Right, Archie. So to the next slide. So the next, again, and thank you. And again, I also want to thank everybody for their efforts in partnering with us here, as well as all of your great efforts for this great organization. So the first couple slides, again, as Narendra showed, obviously the stage gate process, but the cost estimate actually starts right at the beginning, even before the create concept step. And Artie, you could just move along to the next two slides, which is just these slides of the waterfall. And it's really just so, what is the objective here of this cost estimation tool and process? And it's clearly just a critical term that's used, the rough order of magnitude, is to create a rough order of magnitude estimate in the project so that the stakeholders, senior management, the decision makers have a rough, or as best as we can, a good idea of the project costs, so that we can review the assets, understand any of the dynamics, any alternate plans, and so that people have the intelligence as best they can with the calculations of a rough order of magnitude. Next slide, Artie. And so as Naren had said, there's really the two parts of the cost estimator. One, as we did earlier, the informal process, but this is really the focus on the formal gated process, where again, it's a process for our subject matter experts, sponsors, project managers go through this initial stage, even prior to creating the create concept phase. And this rough order of magnitude estimate is really the first effort to estimate the cost throughout the life cycle of the project, not just at the beginning, but ongoing and future costs. So it will give us a general sense of what the project is going to cost prior to any overall funding approval. And as Naren had talked about, again, this is a rigorous and a formal process that needs to be as part of the stage gate, in that it provides pretty much a rigorous framework where we built the hourly rates in there, the efforts per unit cost to determine overall costs. And some of the key features that Naren will talk about later is about looking at the total project cost and the total, how it all rolls together, and that we have some preloaded rates in there for labor and hours, and to use the opportunity to provide a prorated, a baseline effort. And as Naren again also will work through the tabs in the file, which have instructions and questions to provide us and you the best clarity and the best instruction to accomplish this creation of a rough order of magnitude. And again, it's basically really geared towards the formal gated projects of projects $1 million or higher. So next slide. And as we've talked about, Naren, is in the past, certainly the source has this link of, where do you get to the information to do this? Where is the file? Certainly the EPMO team, we have our office hours every Thursday morning that you could bring any questions to, any issues that you might have as you're working on your projects, or certainly to go through ServiceNow to send in any inquiries or comments using the ServiceNow portal. And the next slide, I think, is that it. So again, we're going to have these trainings every month. It's going to be part of the training. So if you're unable to attend a session or you want to review things in a future month, certainly feel free to join us. These sessions are being recorded. You could listen to them, and having the Zoom opportunity allows us to work with you in terms of understanding it, as well as being able to reach out either through us through office hours, or sending messages to the EPMO mailbox, or certainly to ServiceNow inquiries. So at this point, Naren, you could take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. Okay, so let's get started on the importance of cost estimation, right? So as project managers and group product managers, that finally the line of business wants to understand how much is the cost to execute a project or to deliver what they are expecting you to deliver. And in order to get that sort of a sync up between the line of business and the project team, the bridge is basically the cost estimation. And I cannot just stress the importance of cost estimation other than saying that, if you don't have proper estimation, then you might be running into trouble very easily, right? If a project is going to cost $1 million, and unfortunately using a wrong tool or wrong assumptions, if you project $500,000, that means you are off by 50%. So that means it is going to run into trouble very quickly. And no line of business or no project sponsor would like to have a change request, right? That's the last thing they want to see, is that the project team is coming back and asking for more money. So the best effort need to be put in the beginning of the project to understand how much the project will cost. So the cost estimator tools, like I told you, one is available for a lighter version, that is for the informal gated projects. Maybe Aarti, you want to shift to that project templates and we'll show that there. So both the templates are available on the source in the project templates section, and you can download the copy from there and use it. Okay, see, another trick that I want to share with you is never ever use an old file that you have submitted for a different project and start working on it. Never do that. You can refer to that file, but always download the file or the template from the source or from the EPMO SharePoint site and then use it. Okay. Never use the old file and start modifying, because we might have made some changes to the new template, and you end up using the old template, and down the line somewhere in the procurement section or in the BCCT, they may identify that you are using an old template and you go all over again, right? You have to redo the whole steps. So download the new template or the template from the source and use that template, and then fill up the data as you are requested. Aarti, you're looking for the project templates?
I can see that. So that's one. Find it here in the folder.
Now go to the
Maybe on the ITPM.
yeah, go to that, open the internet site and then type the source on the top. Yeah. Yeah. And then type in the project templates. You have it there already. You have to share your screen. Okay, keep going. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so you see this in, this is a very familiar area that as project managers in PSCG, you keep going. You have to flip to that internet site.
Oh, this is the same.
No. This is not, this, I want to show the source. Just go to the source. I want to show them where they're located. Okay, just leave it at this point. Okay. Right.
Sorry.
So we have two places here. The cost estimator, you see the formal gated. Can you scroll a little bit down? And then you'll see there is another one which is called cost estimator. Just keep going. There you go. That one, informal gated and miscellaneous. Okay. So this one is the lighter version of the cost estimation tool that can be used for informal gated, miscellaneous, routine, and blanket projects. Okay. This is nothing new. This has been the cost estimator tool that we have been using earlier also. But the new thing is the cost estimator tool formal gated. Okay. So by clicking that link in the top, can you just go up a little bit, Aarti? Yeah. By clicking that link, you are going to open the file that Aarti is going to navigate. Nothing but that Excel sheet that she is going to show. This is the file. Okay. So this file is a self-explanatory and self-sufficient file. Okay. It has multiple tabs. When you want to use for your formal gated project, so try to go through each of these tabs. There are clear instructions and navigation to the next phase, next tab, how the data flows from one tab to the other tab. So the first one, when you look at it, is the guidelines, and then the second one is the instructions. Okay, so maybe in the instructions tab, you can see step by step each of these tabs, what it does, and then how that data flows from one to the other. Okay, the first two assumptions is the key assumptions, then top-down items, then you have the inventory, then non-workforce cost, and then keep going. Then you will have the project overall complexity, project effort, project cost, and then communicate the results, output summary, right? So that means you will be starting with assumptions on the project. What are you assuming on this project, which you think that you don't have full clarity, right? That is the first tab. So when you go to the first tab, can you click the first tab after that? Yeah. So that's called the key assumptions, okay? There is some master data. If you look at the column, row 7 to row 15, generally these are the master data for that project, right? You may have a project details, so you can enter the project name, the description of the project, and then there is any links that you want to provide there, start date, end date, etc., etc. And then you are going to go in the contingency controls, and all these are self-explanatory. On the right side, you see the explanation about what is that particular field means, okay? So you see enter general details of the project, and then cost in contingency percentage. As project managers, we know that any cost estimate that we are providing is nothing but a rough order magnitude at this stage, okay? That means you are estimating the project cost with the available information, with available knowledge about the requirements and a possible solution that can complete those requirements. So your confidence level can never be 100% at this stage. That's right. This is the first stage, creation concept. The business case you are preparing here. At this stage, your confidence levels are never 100%. It could be 75%, or it could be 50% based on the area the project is going to be executed. If it is a project, let us say, that you have done last year, but this is an extension of that, let's say phase 2 of that project, you know a lot more details, right? If it is a brand new project with no clue of what could be the design, what could be the solution, then your confidence level can be a little bit lower. So this is where you define all the contingencies and the percentages over there. And this flows into your further calculations, okay? Based on your 50% or 75% confidence interval, everything flows to the next level. And also you can see certain coloring here, right? The blue colored ones are nothing but your either reference fields or the fields that you have to input. The pink colored ones are the ones where you will input the data. So that's a standard coloring, and that is explained in the very first tab. That is a workbook guidelines, and the instructions tab, you will see all this coloring and what color means what, okay? And then you also enter the risks on this. So you can identify some of the risks way in the beginning of the project itself. So you will be entering those risks over here. There are so many outstanding issues. Like, for example, you have done the phase 1, you're coming into phase 2. There are some outstanding issues that you need to address from phase 1. You can enter over here. Other contingency assumptions are like some dependencies that you want to bring in, okay? Let's say, for example, the plant maintenance of the power plants, right? They have a fixed schedule every year. So you may like to bring in, same thing with the nuclear, there is a fixed schedule they follow for their maintenance activities. So you want to bring in those details. Now here is the place, the other contingency assumptions that you can bring in. So this is where you are capturing all possible assumptions, the contingencies, the risk factors that might affect the project. So you are basically setting a ground for your cost estimation. And when somebody goes through this cost estimation tool, they know that in a step-by-step that you are going into it. And you're also going to capture the key stakeholders who are going to look at these figures, and then they are going to approve those things. Either they review it and approve it. And also what is the delivery distribution approach, who needs to be communicated with and what should be the delivery mode, etc. So this is the very first tab that you are attending. Okay. Then this data, the metadata that flows from here to the next one, which is a top-down work items. This is where you are defining the scope or the way you are going to handle the project, right? So somebody told you to make some changes to SAP system or a SharePoint or ServiceNow, whatever is the system changes that they want. Those requirements, when you are having a possible solution, like okay, I want to make 5 changes to this customer data entry screen, and that will come into 3 or 4 data interface changes. Then there will be some database table changes, 3 or 4 table new fields to be added to the database tables. There are 10 tables where it will come, and then when I am running a query, I had to make few changes. So you get a little bit of information about what you are going to do as a solution to implement those changes that the business is looking for you. So you will be entering these are the things. You see all these custom code application updates. So these are some of the pre-configured work items that we have built from the best practices and best templates available elsewhere, right, in the other utility companies. So KPMG brought that knowledge and consolidated for us in this template. And if you look at the description or the definition that is given in column F, so a custom coded application new, so 2 to 3 screens developed on a mature technology for a discrete group of users. So that's it. So let us say, for example, I'm developing 3 to 4 screens to add more value for the client interfacing pseg.com, right? So you enter the number there in the column D, right? So you see the complexity of the work item is mentioned in column C, which is simple, medium, and complex. So you put the number of such interfaces that you are going to develop under this project in column D. So when you look, why we're entering is when you enter column the 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 in column D, this goes and uses some reference data that is already built in the later screens, that's way back as reference tabs, and picks up that data and converts that into effort. Okay, how many hours are required in order to develop 2 custom coded applications new? That means 4 to 6 screens, and there is 2 sets of such things that need to be developed. How much of that effort is going to be required? It is a pre-calculated field that comes out of the reference data that we have already used. It is already built into the tool. So this is where you are going to break your entire design, the possible design. Okay, you're not sure of it, we know that, but the possible design and possible development activity will be split into the number of work items, and you are going to enter the data here. Okay. And you can always do, like I said, the coloring pattern that you have to use. And you have the FAQ section on the top. You see that FAQ section, that means any questions that you have, when you click that one, it will take you to that particular FAQ tab, and you can read through those questions, which can facilitate more knowledge about it. Okay. You can go back to homepage, and some of the instructions you can read through in the first blue box on the bottom. Assess each component and determine the solution attributes, etc. So read through them and then understand what you have to input over here. Okay, that's what you are going to do. This is, in my opinion, is the most important tab in order to input your idea, your breakdown of the task into the system, so that the system, a tool can calculate further things like what is the effort, etc., etc. Okay. Moving on to the next one, which is the third stage, which is the workforce effort, right? So based on what you have entered in the previous tab, that the work items tab, this table starts getting populated. Okay. So when you have that, you see that again, you have a lot of help provided on the top half of the screen, then all these things will get populated: work item type, complexity, new modified, and again, you see these baseline hour units, hourly total bills, complexity, adjusted hours, they all are blue, right? They will be calculated for you based on the pre-entered figure, hourly efforts into the screen. So as of now, you see the work item comes from the previous screen. The description again unpopulated, work item type is populated. You can start modifying things if you want, okay? If you feel that you have entered there thinking that it is a complex item, instead of going to the previous screen, you can start modifying the complexity over here, because that complexity is going to calculate column K. You see the complexity adjusted hours will be calculated based on the complexity that you enter in column E. Then new or modified. So you can see, you can enter a little bit more details here, saying that whether you are going to modify the interface that is there existing already, or you are going to create a absolutely new interface, you can start entering that. The reason what that is, you are going to again recalculate the figures in column L, right? As you see that we are accommodating this complex way of calculating, giving weightage to the parameters is not there in the lighter version. It is accommodated in this version because we want this project, because of its importance, because of the budget requirements, we need to have this much of extra look and feel of the cost estimation. The third is the count plus complexity confidence. So between the count, you said 2 or 3 or 4, and then the complexity that you have mentioned over here, you will be putting up a confidence level, right? Right now, I'm thinking about 2 interfaces, but I don't know. So I want to put a complex and the factor confidence at 50%. That means the number of work items that I want to build can go double, right? That's how you want to communicate to the tool that my confidence level is only 50%. This again gets recalculated into the other columns like column M and other things. So finally, by the end of this tool, can you just pick Aarti? So yeah, that's good. So you will see that new modified type and other adjusted hours will come over here. And then total days will be calculated. And then while moving to the right, Aarti, a little bit. So you can see the days per unit, and you can use the arrow, that may be better. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So days per unit and percentage of the total. These are additional calculations that in order to understand, what is the percentage value, etc. If you want to put some comments, you can always put the comments in column P. Okay. So what is happening till now? We captured the assumptions. We broke the solution into number of tasks, what we call them work items. And we enter the work items in the tab 2. I'm using the numbers now. And that information flows into tab 3. And in tab 3, you are going to enter further details about the complexity, about the modification that you want to do, and the confidence intervals, which will do the weighted calculations here. And at the end of this tab, you are going to have all the work item related one. Mind you, these are the direct work related activity. Okay. That means we can call it as a direct labor cost, right? How much is the labor cost that is involved in order to do the project cost. So this data, as again, flows directly into number 4, the non-workforce cost. Here is where you are going to enter non-direct labor costs, which can be material cost, which could be a miscellaneous cost, licensing cost, all those things, which are not labor cost. Okay. So as you can see, the work item, number of task distribution, number of workforce item, and total cost. So there is nothing like we are calculating based on any standard figures, because we cannot estimate how many licenses are required, how many servers are required, or how much cloud space we want, etc., etc. Right? So This is where we are going to enter the data in its absolute form. Okay, so you will enter, let's say, work item number 1, description is no provisioning servers, then non-foresight item, it is an infrastructure item, total cost. You might have got a quotation from Dell or from any other source. You will input the value, and then automatically that will start calculating the percentage of the total. Okay. In the comment section, either you can input the details that you got from the vendor. Let us say, what is that cost from which vendor? Okay. You might have evaluated 3 to 4 vendors, but you finally selected one vendor. You want to provide the details, you can always put them in the comment section. Okay. So what I've done here in addition is non-workforce related cost. This could be, like I said, examples are your server cost, any infrastructure related costs, or your licensing cost, So we can input that data over here. So now we are slowly building the line items of the cost estimation, right? So we have built the workforce related cost. We are now built the non-workforce related cost. And third one is now we're going to go into the tab 5, which is the overall project, the consolidation, the complexity of the project itself. So here we're going to talk about the non-direct costs. Okay, we calculated the direct cost, the labor cost. We calculated the direct material cost. Let us say the word material cost or non-workforce cost. The third one, we are going to calculate the overheads on the project, which are nothing but the project manager cost, your scheduler's cost, controller cost, or your the testing team's cost, review team's cost, all those things you are going to calculate now by phase, right? For example, you have the project management plan, you have potential impact of 3%, you can always change that. Then you have the default values are shown in the blue color in the column H, and you can modify the complexity in column I, okay? And that will take care of the percentage impact calculation in column J. So column J is built-in macros or calculations into formulae that will take care of the potential impact in column D and column I data and convert into a percentage impact on column J. Okay. The total is always 100%. Between the different project management characteristics, you will start playing around. Let us say in one of the things that, your quality is the highest, thing, okay? Or security can be the highest thing. So you want to basically put that value of the potential impact in column D, right? And that will automatically change the scope, the percentage calculations around. Once you scroll down a little bit, Aarti, you see the application, and then you have technical architecture, you have change enablement. So you have different sections that you want to incorporate into your calculations, right? Let's say, for example, you are rolling out a project, a solution that's enterprise-wide. Now, just imagine enterprise-wide means you are talking about thousands of people, so many training sessions, and so much train the trainer or whatever your concept you follow, that involves a lot of cost, correct? Or you may engage a third party to do the training itself. So the cost involved over there, that all will be factored into these different categories, okay? Is it an application related cost, or is it technical architecture related cost, or you can have the change enablement, right? So these are the various project management related activities which are non-direct implement on the project. So we got the third category here. First category being the direct labor cost. Second category is the direct material cost. And third one is the indirect labor cost, right? We have brought in 3 costs already. And then when we go to the tab 6, right, that's where the costs are now going to go into one place, right? We're going to bring the cost from all these in one phase. And then you can see now this is being divided by phase, create concept, develop press release. We may have to make a change over there. Project infill, intimation, development. These are the 7, the gates, the stages of the SGP. Then recommended percentage, and then override percentage. If it is, you feel that it is not now 20% for project initiation, I feel it is 10% good enough. Okay, override it with the value in the pink, right? And then automatically you will see the calculations happening in the rest of the things. All these calculations are done. On the top, okay, let me finish the bottom half and then come to the top half. Can you go scroll down a little bit on? Yeah. So the adjusted hours by phase. As you can see, we are now slowly splitting the costing into days and hours, right? By phase, how many hours and in terms of days, and what is the percentage of the total, and the total always comes to 100%. The projected effort allocation by function. So these are the functions that we have pictured in the previous, remember? How much of non-direct labor cost. So they are all going to flow from that tab into this tab. With the complexity adjustment, you will have the adjusted effort in column M and N. So as you can see, the concept is you create the baseline, you put the complexity or the weightage that you want to give to that particular line item, and then use the adjusted cost, which is a new feature, or which is the feature for this formal gated cost estimator. This feature is completely missing in the informal gated cost estimator. That's a very flat, simple calculations thing. You put a value, it totals it. It doesn't do any weightage, or it doesn't add to the complexity, impactfulness, or risk, or anything. This one calculates all those things because we are now addressing the most either very important, impactful projects, or risky projects, or high budget projects. So we want to be very sure, or at least near the 100% confidence level to calculate all these things. Once we have these things, if you go up a little bit onto the top screen, you see on the left side, you see the total effort summary. As I told you in one of the sections, the cost estimated tool not only gives you the cost, it also gives you the effort picture, right? It is telling you how much of effort is required plus contingencies, number of days, hours, total project effort, inventory based and resource based, right? And then the contingency that you are going to calculate. Contingency, like we can 10%, 15%, 20%, that comes over here. The risk and 50%. You see that, for example, if you put risk and contingency as 10% in the first screen that you have, where you have entered the risk and contingency, that will flow over here, and then you will recalculate the figures on top that includes contingency too. Explanations are given in the blue box right next to it. Now, what exactly that means: project level complexity adjustments, phases, work schedule, adjustment estimates, etc., etc. Okay. And now we got the total effort of the project, but the ultimate thing is how much it is going to cost, right? So go to the next tab, which is tab 7, where you will have the final ultimate picture from the perspective of cost estimation. Okay. So as you look through this, the different tabs, you have the reference on the first box. And then when you go down, you can see the multiple line items on the left side. You see this? You have a IT labor outside services. Then you have workforce related costs, which is a material and others. You have contingency cost, risk and contingency. You have fixed costs for outside services, project total cost. Okay. So you can see some of these things are not coming from the previous tabs. Okay. For example, the fixed cost for the outside services. So as you can see that any project can be executed as a time and material resource, or is it a fixed cost? So as a fixed cost, if you want to engage the outside services, that is a vendor, you better enter the data over here, right? And then you got the line of business cost too. It's not only your involvement in the project cost, but you're also going to spend a lot of time from the line of business, that the business has to do the testing, they have to do the other activities, training, attending the trainings, etc., etc. So enter those details over here. So this is the summary of the workforce effort. And on the right side, again, you have a chance to adjust your costs based on capital and O&M. Okay, so you can say basically that, I have $100,000 estimated for create concept phase based on the figures that I entered. But when I come over here, I feel that there is a distribution of capital and O&M. Either it could be 100% capital or it could be 50-50, 60-40, whatever is it. So you can put the percentages over there. What we have given in column G and H are recommended allocations. We think that create concept effort by the nature of that activity over there is 100% O&M. May not be true, right? In a capital project, starting from the start to end, it could be a capital effort. So in that situation, you can override those figures in column I and J. So once you enter those figures, then it is the column, the data and K, L, and M will be recalculated. Okay. So that is the O&M and capital distribution. On the bottom, if you look at the blended rate costs, right, this is where we are going to do by phase, a product hour details you enter, the roles and the director. And this is where you are going to calculate the labor cost by phase of the project. Okay, let's say, for example, in a design phase, I may be using 2 infrastructure guys for 30 hours. I will be using, let us say, my application team, 5 people for 80 hours each. I may use desktop management team. I may use the help desk team. So you enter those details and automatically the hourly rates are picked up by the level of that particular resource. Okay. The roles are defined and the defined roles. We have loaded the hourly rates based on the SAP. SAP, which is our system of record, has all the cost data built into it. So we picked up those data and then we'll populate it over here for you. You can allocate the resource, like I said, 10%, 5%, 20%, and then you will be calculating the effort in hours and the resource cost. This is basically to give you the resource cost for the items. The previous tab that we have used is for the effort in terms of the pre-built effort per work item, right? So this is basically where you are going to calculate the resource cost. So when you go on to the top, that is what you are going to finally present in your cost estimation. Arthi, can you go up? So to know the previous tab, go up to the top. Okay. So this is where on the left side, you see the project cost summary. This will be your basis to pick up the data and populate it in your business case, right? Ultimately, you are going to present it to the project sponsors and the senior leadership team. And this is where the data comes, and this data is copied over to the BC document, okay? Or a system that is going to be deployed to capture the BC data. So all these things, whatever you have been doing from the second tab, the third tab to all the way to the 7th tab will culminate into 8th tab. That is the output summary. Okay. So when you click that, you will see the description wise, and on the top, you see the populate work items. When you click that, whatever work items you have defined in the previous tab, they get populated into this. Okay. So the description, work item type, count, complexity, effort, confidence, and comments. This is all is going to be populated here because this is where you are going to explain what are all the work items that you have considered and how the cost calculations have worked out. Okay. And like that's where, but there are certain other tabs that I want to show you beyond this are the way these reference fields are calculated. You see the work item type and complexity help is basically to explain you what are the different work items that we have considered from the best practices data available outside and what is the complexity that means. Okay, this is for your reference. You can read it and understand, and then accordingly enter the data in the tab 3. Hours per unit guide is the reference data for you to get the role versus the cost. Okay, this tab, what you see here is nothing but the hours per unit guide. Let's say, for example, you take a building of an application page. We expect 13 hours is required per unit, and then hours simple and new complex. And then you see the create concept. That split is automatically happening based on the percentage you have declared in row 4. The row 4 has the percentages defined on top. So based on the data, that automatically splits the data. Okay. So this is how this is going to flow into the previous tab, the summary tab, where you are going to explain how the resources by phase are going to come up. Right? Can you scroll down a little bit? So you have a lot of dictionary built about all these project management costs and non-project management costs, workforce inventory. You see, these are the work items that we had in the tab 3, right? The same way. You see the count and simple and all these calculations, how that happens. The next tab is the resource tab, where I wanted to show you how we loaded the data from SAP. Okay. This data is by role, that is predefined in SAP. And those are the approximate rates that are approved or accepted by our finance team. You might be finding some discrepancies and some things. If you can point out that there are certain things that you want to make changes, we will work with the finance team and see how those things can be accommodated. If you find your role is not there, let us know. So we will try to build the database accordingly. Okay. So we can, like I said, all this effort is basically is a continuous improvement mode. So we can keep on, refining this tool. And the last tab, what I want to talk is the FAQ section, which is very helpful in order to understand what are all these tabs and different sections where I'm going to input the data. So this is where it's going to say, explain you most of the data. If you have any more questions, let us know. We will provide the responses in the column D, so that this becomes a lot more beneficial tab for the project managers. So this is where we got the total picture of the cost estimator tool. Okay, when I do these things, yeah, you will feel, oh my God, there is so much to do it. But provided once you do it for a project, that will be the first effort, and you might be feeling it a little bit difficult to fill in the data. But once you fill and get used to the cost estimator tool, that's what happens. Even for the informal gated projects, there were a lot of people have felt, oh, what to do this, what is this tab, what is that tab. So at least this tool has a lot of explanation about each of those cells and how the calculations happen from one tab to the other tab. Okay. So I will take a pause here. I think I have given a lot of information on this tool, but like I said, this is for a formal gated project. Okay. So think about it. First thing first, understand your requirements, categorize the project, come to this if you are categorizing yourself as a formal gated project, and go to the informal gated project if it is in a small project with no big impact or risk involved in it, not regulatory project, as a blanket or a routine project. Go to the informal gated template. And you must be wondering, how do I know whether the project is more than $500 or $1 million, right? In order to select between the two things. Go through the parameters, you will automatically come to know. Is it a regulatory requirement? Done. You are automatically here. Is the project high risk project? You are here. That means from security team, if this is rated as a high potential risk project, then you are here. It is a very important project driven by the line of business, as they're driven with their goals, or the technology related, automatically you are here. If you are crossing all these things and then come to a stage, then with your past experience, or with your colleagues, you are with group product managers would be able to help you. Oh, a similar project has costed us $2 million earlier. Okay, so take that as an example, then you are into formal gated area. So I know there is a bit of discussion and research that you have to do in order to select, categorize yourself. But once you have done it, it is worth this cost estimator tool, that it gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of insight into various cost elements. Okay. So having said all these things, I'll just pause it a little bit for the people to ask any questions. But if you need help, if you need assistance, we are there for you to navigate you. So if somebody is trying to use this tool and they want to have a working session, let us know. So EPMO team member would be happy to work with you, and it could be learning from both sides. We will understand what other enhancements need to be done for this project, this tool, and you will know how to navigate yourself through the tool. Okay, so that's my presentation on estimation. Any questions? Okay, I know that you people need to digest this information, so feel free, go through this tool, understand each of them, and based on your knowledge that you go through it, and if you have any doubts or any clarifications that you need, let us know. So okay, we will talk about that later. So having done that section, so we are left with one section, the risk management. Salita is going to handle that topic. Again, please use the different forums, different the ways to reach us. So automatically we will be able to be with you and help you out. Okay. Okay, Salita, yours. And most probably I may have to drop off because I had to catch up another meeting at 4. But good luck, guys, and let us know any assistance you need. Okay. Thank you all.
Great, thank you, Naren. Well, welcome to the risk, issue, and decision management topic. I realize it's 4 o'clock and it's getting late, but this is likely a topic that everyone is familiar with. So we will look at how the process and how it's applied here at PSEG. So first off, this process is designed to help you with successful delivery of any program. Hold on one second, let me minimize. It's to improve service delivery, it's aligned to best practices, and the end goal is to ensure that your program stakeholders had visibility of any risk or hazards related to your initiative. We have 4 types here. We have risk, which is defined as the exposure to situations that may negatively impact your project or program. Issues, these problems specifically impact the design or delivery of your project. Decisions, choices to be made by the project team or the leadership that impact other teams or future project work. And change requests. Once your scope and your project have been defined, any change to the agreement of scope, schedule, cost, or resources requires submission of a change request. A little bit of a delay there. Well, here is our guideline and escalation criteria, and I won't go through reading all of these charts to you. The point is that you have them here for reference, and it provides a guideline for engagement frequency. If you have an item that is low risk, your frequency for managing that versus medium, and it gives you some examples as to how to make that determination. And it gives you some management guidelines by status. At level 1, a project team would manage a low level risk. At level 1, the project team would manage a low level issue. And it gives you some descriptions of how you manage based on status up to executive level consideration and review. And again, of course, if you have any questions about your engagement frequency or your management guidelines, you can absolutely reach out to the EPMO team to help you work through that. Here is the RID management approach. You can see here that there's some key definitions over here to bring clarity. If you have any questions about project level versus portfolio level RID items, you have some key definitions over here. But the major point of this slide is that 75% of your RID items will be managed by the project team. The expectation is that the project team would meet weekly to evaluate risk and assess risk. 75% of that is managed by the project team. And as it increases in priority, it's managed by the project manager, the product manager, the program steering committee, which manages high priority items, and then executive level manages critical RID items. So when we manage a risk issue or decision for a project, all items must be logged in your project repository in ServiceNow, and we'll have a look at that in a future slide. The PM and the RID owner will update and manage these items in the RID register. Guidance around your title, it should allow for easy identification of your item. The description should be short, but sufficient to define the impact to the project, and so you can develop a complete action plan. You set the importance level based on the matrix guidelines that we looked at earlier. You update the category with the appropriate type. You leave the state as open initially. The assigned to person is the person who will actually be doing the work and updating the RID item. The owner is the person ultimately responsible for managing the risk or resolving the issue. The due date is the date by which the item needs to be mitigated, resolved, completed, or approved. And in the action plan, we indicate the actions needed to mitigate, resolve, or complete the issue, or the item rather. Again, we have several slides around identifying the project team, the ownership, the role. This slide is relates to risk and who has responsibility for managing what aspects of a risk. We won't read through this slide, but for your awareness, you can reference this slide for deeper understanding related to risk. Similarly, you have a slide related to issues. This slide guides you around the responsibilities, the key roles for managing and executing the risk management plan as it relates to issues, managing issues. So please do reference this slide for a deeper understanding around those key roles and responsibilities. You have the same type of slide around decision management. Who's responsible for managing and executing aspects of the risk management plan as it relates to decision making, decision presentation, and documenting those decisions. Again, you have the same type of slide around change so that you can reference these key roles and responsibilities around managing change. So what are risk management stages? So to properly manage your risk, you'll need to go through these 5 steps. Number 1 is risk identification. What are your risks? How could they impact your project? What's the probability of occurrence? And how would you respond to that risk? Step 2, risk analysis and assessment, which we'll look at in just a bit. You assess the impact and probability of a risk so that you can prioritize them and determine the cost if the risk occurs and define your budget for risk response planning. This is done qualitatively in early stages and then quantitatively in later project phases. You'll want to look at risk response planning. You want to develop options and determine courses of action to enhance opportunity to reduce threats. Risk monitoring and control. Of course, just because you define or identify your risks early on, you want to monitor and manage those risks throughout the project life cycle. And then risk closure. As you move to the end of your project, you want to understand the difference between closing a risk versus closing a risk that becomes or that became an issue. So we'll look at that as well. So here is a look at RID management by stage. And you've seen this image several times during today's training, but we'll apply the RID management process to this phase. So early on, and we'll look at the waterfall flow. During the create concept phase, of course, you're at a level of maturity that's only plus or minus 50% at this point. So you're really identifying high level risks to your initiative. And a qualitative risk tends to be more subjective. It focuses on simply identifying the risk so that you can measure the likelihood of risk occurrence and the impact that it have on your initiative. The goal here is to determine the severity. Then as you move to developing your business case, you'll want to finalize, and I don't like the word finalize here because you don't finalize it, you bring it to a greater level of maturity, your initial risk assessment, and we'll look at that in just a bit. As you move to project initiation, you'll want to perform a more complete qualitative risk assessment. And here's where you want to identify your change plan owner. As you move into the design phase, again, you mature your quantitative risk assessment, and your quantitative risk assessment is where you use verifiable data to analyze the effect of a risk. You assign a numerical value to existing risks based on quantifiable data. So the difference here in the design phase is now you're doing a quantitative risk assessment versus the qualitative risk assessment, which is more subjective early on. So you have your qualitative here, and then you begin to perform your quantitative risk assessment here. As you move into the design phase, you want to update your risk and issue register, document any newfound risks or issues, and you'll want to update your risk contingency estimates. As you've moved along your project life cycle, your estimation becomes better and clearer. So here's where you'll want to update those contingency estimates. As you move into the direct and manage phase, again, as we stated, you're in a constant cycle. You're meeting with your team members to constantly update your risk and issue log. You'll want to make sure you're capturing everything, assessing everything. But here, when you get into direct and manage, here's where you want to begin documenting your lessons learned. You'll want to obtain IT Change Control Board approval to implement your project or your product as you move into the deployment phase. And then when you move into the deployment phase, this is where you'll want to close any project risk or issue or ensure that project risks and issues are closed. So here is where we'll talk about change management classification. Here are your types that influence change management: scope. Scope change is, of course, a modification to the scope of the project as it was initially defined in the project charter. Schedule is any impactful modification of critical task dates that have been approved in baseline. So that's where you apply change management. Cost, any change that results in project budget exceeding the approved budget. And resources. changes to resources that have a scope, schedule, or cost implication or impact. You see some examples over here of issues that generate a change request. So let's look at the waterfall methodology. I'll pause here just a moment to see if anyone has any questions before we move forward and we look at actually applying this in the waterfall methodology. Great, I'll take silence as agreement to move forward then. So we've looked at this, we've talked about this initially. We're at the create concept phase, and the create concept phase, as we talked about earlier, is where the business has an idea. They have a concept that they would like to have considered for the organization to invest in. At this level, you're identifying high-level risks, you're identifying resources and bringing in subject matter experts as needed. And this is where your risk and issue register will be created. Your input is your qualitative risk assessment, your high-level risk identification, and your output is your risk or issue report. You initiate your risk or issue register, and your output will be that register. And over here, you see the owners of that process. Here is risk identification. We'll talk about risk identification here, where we document potential risks. And one note here, timely identification and communication of risk is successful for you to be able to mitigate or avoid the risk or resolve it. So we have risk identification methods in this column. We have our categorization column here that tells you which category your risk belongs in. Your communication method here identifies just exactly that, how you will communicate the type of risk based on its category. And then here is what your communications will include. And we'll look at this in future slides. That'll make it a little more applicable to how you would work with it in real life. Let me skip a slide, yes. So here is your real application of qualitative risk assessment. You have an aspect here of considering probability. And probability is how likely is it that, what's the percentage of probability that the risk will occur? So you see your percent, and I actually like to work through this slide a little bit backwards. I look at it as, is this risk extremely likely to occur during my project schedule? What's the percent of probability? Is it 75%? Is it 50%? So that's where I determine my probability. So say I have a risk that is fairly likely to occur during my project schedule, and I say, yeah, it's about a 50-50 chance that that would occur. Well, that probability is likely, and my probability scale here is a 3. So that's how I would rate that probability. I then look at the impact of the risk. I might determine that, yeah, it's fairly likely to occur. And you know what? If it does occur, there's going to be a significant disruption to the successful delivery of my project. There is likely significant disruption is defined as a 5 to less than 10% impact to budget, a 20 to 30 day impact to schedule. That's what defines significant disruption. Therefore, my impact is high, and my scale is a 4. So here is my risk assessment step. I have identified in my earlier example that my probability was likely. I rated it on a scale 3. I determined that my impact was high. And so my risk index is your probability, is a calculation of your probability times your impact. So I said my probability was a 3 and my impact was a 4. So 3 times 4 is 12. So that means my risk index for that individual risk is a high because it's in this range. So I hope that that makes sense. And you see this impact matrix down here. We looked at the probability. Here's your impact matrix. Say that my impact, I've determined in my previous impact that my impact was high, but I said my probability was medium. No, I said in my example, I said my impact was medium, but my probability was high. So you get your risk index through the calculation of those two risk probability times risk impact. And the reason I bring that to your attention is because when you are developing your business case, this risk assessment step is an input to your business case. So it's imperative that you understand how to get your probability scale and how to get your impact scale so you can understand how to report your risk index. And I'll pause here to see if anyone has a question around this risk assessment aspect. Right, we'll move forward then. So here is where we enter the risk in your business case, or you manage your risk throughout the project life cycle in ServiceNow. You'll go to your project risk record, you'll select the risk tab. The gear icon allows you to add or remove columns in your view, and you just simply select whatever columns you want to see in your risk register, and then you click OK. Bit of a pause here. So in creating a new risk, you'll want to manage this risk effectively. As we talked about before, you'll want to meet as a team on a weekly basis or based on the frequency. The frequency is based on the status of that risk. So if you have a risk that's critical, you'll want to provide daily updates. If you have a risk that is a high risk, you'll want a minimum of 2 weekly updates. So you can see your status and the register update frequency. So that's something you'll want to note. This again is, you go to your risk tab, click on create a new risk record, you fill out the form and you click save. You log progress in your working notes section, and you be sure to save your working notes. So here is your risk and issue register. And your register, these are the fields that must be updated in your risk register because it's the information that's reported related to risk. We will not read through all of these fields, but for your awareness, all of these fields must be updated. I'm getting a bit of a lag in my slides. This is simply a continuation of the required fields that must be updated in your register. Please pardon the lag in these slides. I'm not really sure why we're starting to get a lag now. And here are the required fields that you must update when you develop your mitigation plan. So again, we won't go through all of these fields. You'll have these fields available to you. I'm sorry, this slide will be available to you. So now we'll move forward and we'll look at our quantitative risk assessment. And remember when we talked about our quantitative risk assessment, it is based on verifiable data and it assigns a numerical value to the risk. So that's what we'll look at now. So to perform this analysis, you identify and populate the following information for each of your risks. So the percent probability we looked at, and you understand the scale here. This is how you perform your analysis. And we have a 3-point cost impact estimate. Of course, you develop these values through your risk workshops, lessons learned, industry data. And in the following slide, we're going to look at an example of this calculation. So we use the PERT method, which is minimum cost impact plus my most likely cost impact. You see the formula in front of you. So let's look at a description of a risk. Let's take the first one, key resource or resource turnover. It's highly likely that this risk would occur. And so you look at the minimum cost impact plus the most likely cost impact times 4 gives you times 4 and then plus this maximum cost impact. And that gives you your contingency that you should plan for based on the PERT method. So when you are assessing risk for your project and you have high risk or even some low risk that you really want to manage that will have a cost impact, you want to be sure that you have contingency budget to manage these risks. So thresholds for executive approval. So a change request is necessary if you meet any of these conditions. So when you identify an affected task or budget or schedule, so here are your conditions. If the budget is impacted and there's a plus or minus 10% baseline, it will require a change request. As well, if a key milestone is impacted and it causes a change to your schedule at plus 10% in your baseline, or if your schedule or budget is, if there is a re-baseline to your schedule or budget, then again, a change request is necessary and it is submitted to the program and executive steering committee. Once that change request is reviewed, the project manager and the RID owner record the change request results in their plan and store those documents in the project repository. So here's your risk response planning. This is when you have identified a risk, and if the risk should materialize, how are you going to manage that risk? So you have a few mitigation strategies. Avoidance, you could avoid the risk. So an action is planned such that the risk is either can no longer have an impact on the project, or the probability is 0. An example of risk avoidance is that you change the project schedule, you change the technology, or you reduce the scope. You can transfer the risk. The risk will shift the threat of risk to a third party, including ownership of the response. In this case, the project team needs to be fully aware of the strategy and that it moves responsibility to another party, but it does not eliminate that risk. And so you see an example here is assignment of the task to a sub-project or to a third party in the form of a fixed price engagement. You can minimize the risk. An action is planned to reduce the probability of the risk occurring or reduce the impact of the risk should it arise. An example is that you adopt less complex processes, you can build a prototype, or execute a proof of concept. Or the final strategy is to simply accept the risk. This means you take no action. The threat should continue to be monitored. You'll adopt this strategy if there's low probability or low impact to your initiative. And you'll document the response strategy, let the risk owner and the project team deal with the risk as it occurs, and make use of contingency budget here. So risk closure, closing a resolved risk. So you have developed a strategy to mitigate the risk and you decide to close the risk. You'll definitely want, the risk is no longer a threat to your project, and you'll definitely want to conduct a lessons learned so that you can document this experience so that you can avoid it with related projects or future projects. What about closing a risk that's become an issue? So an issue is a risk that has been realized. As soon as the risk is triggered and it becomes an issue, the risk owner assigned to that risk manages the risk and updates the RID register. For risks that have turned into issues, the risk owner is responsible for closing the risk in the risk register. So that takes us through risk management planning from a waterfall perspective. The document that we have online takes you through risk management, assessment, and planning for Agile methodology as well, but I'm not sure that we need to walk through the Agile methodology. Please give us a show of hands or let me know if we'd like to walk through the Agile aspect of risk management. What are thoughts here? So I will take silence as consensus to close out the risk management and risk planning module of training at this point. So if you do have questions about risk management, risk assessment, how do you create your risk register, of course, the IT EPMO team remains available to support any additional training or support any inquiries. You've seen this slide before. You can reach us during IT EPMO office hours, which are every Thursday, 10 to 11. It's a Zoom meeting. The meeting invitation to that is sent to a fresh distribution group 1 week prior to that meeting. You can reach us at our IT EPMO mailbox, so you can simply send an email requesting support, or you can submit a request through ServiceNow. And that concludes the training around risk management. Do we have any open questions? Well, great. If we don't have any questions, that concludes our training for today. We appreciate your attendance and we look forward to collaborating with you on your initiatives and projects. And as always, we remain available as a team to give you any guidance or support or resolution to issues. So thank you for your time and I hope you have a great day or the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.